Okay, you have to make a decision on how you're going to do your investments. I just look that there's so many good veteran opportunities that are out there, veteran led opportunities in all different asset types to go through. That I just enjoy it. And so for me personally, I know there's a whole group of people, it's the same way. It doesn't mean that there's non-veterans that are doing it, that you couldn't go there, but it's just, I like that's where my money is. And that's what my money is doing. I'm probably greater than 90% of my direct investment type opportunity, things that aren't the S&P 500 type things, but all the other ones are really with veterans because it is that element, not only just the element of trust, but it's just like, where do you want your money to go? And what do you want your money to be doing? It plays a pretty darn big role for me. And I know I'm not the only one out there that's the way you're thinking as well. So yeah, I have a choice where I'm going to put the money, and all things else being equal, I like the fact that I've invested in a veteran.
So one of the things that you were telling me that you are naturally very passionate about and think a lot about is, how do we get more veteran businesses funded? And we're going to get into talking about Localvest today and like your position there and what you think that the future looks like for Localvest. But what is it that you think of as the major hurdle when it comes to veterans in business?
I think a lot of it is, if you think about it, we've got this relationship that we all built, right? And this trust that we have with each other, but it came from doing non-money things. Like when I was at sea and out in the submarine, we'd probably go weeks on end. We wouldn't even talk about money and business. It was the matter, the task that we had at hand, what people did when they grow up. If you think about it, whether it's your early 4 or 5 year commitment, or even if you spend 10, 15 years in, or even your full 20, that's a lot of time that you're building up a lot of trust with each other. But when it doesn't have the money background, it means when you get out and you start to have a discussion about money, you don't have the same relationship you have, let's say, if you had gone to college and people did a business track and some people went to a bank or an investment firm, private equity. And so, oh, I know somebody from 20 years ago who has been doing this for 5 or 10 years. So it's almost like we've got a lot of trust built up, but we don't have the deep relationships and things that have to do with business and money. And I think that's what we're all out here trying to do now is, okay, how can we plug people in who are just getting out with people who have the experience from the veteran side of things to essentially pull each other up and says, okay, how do we teach each other? Because it's not a matter of skill set, like it can't be done by veterans, but it's just that the time to actually build up some of those relationships in a money setting. And so I think that's the hard part for us, is to how to learn faster. And a lot of us are used to learning faster and learning something completely different and changing jobs to go. That how do we do that when it comes to veterans and raising capital for whatever their business enterprise is? How can we bring more people together and make that learning happen in the fastest way possible?
I think you're really onto something there. Like you said, we spend a lot of time developing these really tight-knit relationships in the military. Like you said, at sea, that is like prime grounds for developing these really great connections. But then all of a sudden you get out of the service, and it's not that those don't mean anything, but those people are like suddenly unable to help you on basically anything. They might provide a good reference for you, like getting another job to like tee you up and talk good about you. However, if you want to have like a banking relationship, if you want to any type of professional network, your past like military connections usually aren't much help for that.
And it can be, but you're correct. But I don't want to downplay this too much, because I actually do think
Mhm.
there's a lot. You're correct, but I think it takes a veteran to help translate. Like, look, this looks like something that you've done in the past. It's just a different language, a little bit different style, but you got it in you. And that's the biggest thing. It does not make us any different that we serve. So yeah, I think it's the education piece is the biggest part, and to know where. I guess you could say too, when you do the different degrees of relationships that you have, that you could probably trust on a relationship that's further down. So I want more veterans to know, if you reach out to almost any veteran and say you want to have a conversation with them, learn about something that you just are clueless about right now, and you know that you got to do it to get yourself up to speed, you can actually reach out and make that connection. Even better if someone helps make the connection for you. But I continually am shocked. I don't know how many of you all would need to hear this, but you can, if any veteran reaches out to me, like I say, you probably have 30 minutes. right? Someone's going to give you the time of day and talk about what your past was, what you did while you served, and what you're doing. Now, after that, it's all up to you. But these links are really strong, and use the network, right? Have those conversations. And if that makes you nervous to just cold call someone on doing that and start the relationship as a veteran, then use that network and there's someone that connect to. And so the more of those connections we make, I'm like, hey, meet Brock here. He's working on a project here and he does not understand how this concept of business works. And you work it every single day. Can you link up with him and explain how it works? And it really happens. But a bunch of us have a fear, like I need to walk in and know day one exactly how this thing works. And I look out at my peers, my same age, and they've been doing this for 5 or 10 years. I'm just getting started. Maybe it's too late for me. And my answer is no, it's not. It's just a matter of connecting with someone who could show you how it's done.
I guess I don't mean to downplay the value of the veteran title and the networking thing. I guess I was speaking
Sure.
more towards the people who are still in service versus like when you're looking forward in your career, you absolutely do want to be pulling the vet card. If somebody is in an industry or in a job title that you are interested in pursuing, see that they are former service, that should be your opening line
Nice.
right
Yeah.
there. And I think that's probably something people underutilize as a whole, but it's okay to use that, especially when you're just getting started out. And maybe even I remember being in the position of just having got out of service, no idea what I want to do. And then kind of like I'm a little bit more extroverted anyway. So I didn't have any problem using that, but have lots of friends that are wanting to get into industry. And I'm like, why aren't you talking to people? Why aren't you getting out there and networking to learn? It's just as not as obvious, I think, to most.
Yeah. I wasn't as extroverted to go through. So I was probably one of those guys like, how do I go about doing it? Because it is weird because as veterans, we go to a base to go through, you don't have to, the connections start to make themselves for you. You do feel pretty alone when you first come out and go through. I'm like, I need to go talk to people. And it can be a big hurdle if you're not used to doing that. It's not something that naturally comes to you.
Something that I've thought a lot about in the process of this podcast is trying to meet veterans where they are, and veterans and current service for that matter, but meet people where they are. And a lot of times for most professionals, veteran oftentimes doesn't get included at the top of the list of things that are like maybe still important to them. It's part of their past, but they're like forging ahead in a new career path or industry. And that is still like a line of connection that people have to pull on and bring that to the forefront of the conversation. Say, hey, yeah, we can still connect over this. And it's my personal opinion that being former service sets you up in unique ways, regardless of the industry that you go into or what you choose to do. But I don't think that a lot of people think about it that way. It's more, hey, I'm now in this new industry that's not the military, and this is my new identity. And I guess I would support the idea that doesn't necessarily go away like a lot of people maybe not think that it does, but maybe it's just forgotten, or at least that's what I see a lot.
I think I will tell you though, I think if you, like I said, I think if you draw on it, you can pull some of those relationships out. So for example, I know within larger companies, I know there's a lot of people you can go and they'll have different groups for veterans, or just recognize yourself as a veteran online, even to go through of meet and greets and just trying to find people who are doing something like you're doing in your area. It can go a long way to help to just start to forge those connections. There's probably some group out there that's meeting and having a conversation within that comfort level of that affiliation that you've got. And that can help. If you're concerned with how in the world do I go and do this one-on-one conversations, that can sometimes help you. That can help you get over that hump. So it could be that either there is a group or starting a group with either where you are, where you're located, the community that you're in, and you can start to reach out to people and bring a few people together. So it's not a one-on-one conversation, and that can really help too and start to network out that way.
How important do you think that the networking piece is when it comes to what you do at Localvest? Like, how does that integrate into it?
I think the whole thing is huge. The first conversation you have with anybody, right, is about your initial level of trust. And then you have to continue to do things to continue to build that trust. So to get in the first door to have any conversation, when someone reaches out to you, you're trying to build that rapport as quickly as you can and the affiliations you do. So that's why you start bringing up where you grew up, or where you went to school starts to become important. And that military piece is the one closest behind, or any groups that you're associated with or activities that you do. And so it's absolutely essential. It's essentially, it's the thing that gets your foot in the door. Everything from there depends upon you and what you're offering. And that goes across whether in our part raising capital, but then also trying to get a job, trying to start a business, trying to make a sale, trying to do any part, trying to find someone to join you, hire someone. It's all that relationship, that conversation that you have, and it's building that trust. And so I think that whole thing, everything you can do and use it as a veteran, it's a great resource to be able to lean on to make that initial conversation. But then I go through them. No one is going to make a sale or do any of these things that is listed just because you're a veteran part. It's the part that it gets you in there so that you continue the conversation. It goes, all right, tell me more. I want to hear what you have to offer here and what you're talking about. But that initial piece, if you don't have that, you're trying to build it some other way. And it can be a pretty darn tough climb if you were doing it absolutely positively cold outreach and you have to scramble around trying to figure out what that connection is. That is a pretty darn hard sale. So if you have a way to try to make that connection first, you are well on your way to having a better conversation and converting.
Something that you do a lot, and even before your current position, are looking to invest in companies, particularly with a passion for like veteran founders and how to promote and grow those businesses led by vet founders. How often would you say that you find yourself in a position solely relying on that trust to make an investment in somebody?
It's pretty much, for me personally, it's pretty much say completely that a non-starter if you're not a veteran to go through, but it's okay. You have to make a decision on how you're going to do your investments. I just look that there's so many good veteran opportunities that are out there, veteran-led opportunities in all different asset types to go through, that I just enjoy it. And so for me personally, I know there's a whole group of people, it's the same way. It doesn't mean that there's non-veterans that are doing it, that you couldn't go there, but it's just, that's where my money is, and that's what my money is doing. And I'm probably greater than 90% of my direct investment type opportunity, things that aren't the S&P 500 type things. But all the other ones are really with veterans because it is that element, not only just the element of trust, but it's like, where do you want your money to go and what do you want your money to be doing? It plays a pretty darn big role for me. And I know I'm not the only one out there that's the way you're thinking as well. So yeah, I have a choice where I'm going to put the money, and all things else being equal, I like the fact that I've invested in a veteran. It's a nice thing to be able to do.
So you maybe get some sense of feeling like you're giving back to the community by supporting veterans in that way and encouraging that kind of entrepreneurial spirit then?
That's absolutely right. It's just a cool thing to be able to see that happening, right? As people are developing themselves to go through that. For me, it's a strong sense of a part of my investment strategy, right? And I think people talk about having a double bottom line or triple bottom line or more as it goes through. And it's like, it's more than just this return number on the page. It's that, but then it's also who's it going to? So you start seeing, I see lots of people come in and invest either the veteran led company or it's a company that's doing something for the community and helping out because it's the problem that you see, and you like to be able to invest and help out in the things that you see. It's a big draw for me, and I know I'm not the only one that's out there doing the same thing. We see a lot of investors say the same thing as they come in about why they're investing in something that's on the Localvest platform or just veterans in general.
I really like that investment thesis because I agree with you. I think that it encourages the right things. It pushes vets towards going out and being self-starters after service. It's using, hey, take these things that you learn and go do something with them in the business world and make an impact. I'm firmly behind that. How do you think about people who maybe use the veteran title in a malicious way? Or maybe not even malicious, but something that I have come to see over the last few years is just the insane amount of nonprofits. And not that nonprofits are bad, but a lot of people add this veteran logo to things that it's almost like a virtue signaling thing that we support vets or whatever. Have you come across that? And if so, how do you think about managing like what people's incentives actually are? Like maybe sussing those out or testing them?
I think it's just all conversation. Like I said, the initial conversation, like it's getting a foot in the door, and you just have to make that judgment on your own as to what are their true intentions here and what are we trying to do. There is a lot of that to go through. I think we want to separate too that there are ones that smells funny when you see about what the opportunity is and why they're trying to do it. I think there's probably another whole conversation on the number of people who you can tell that their intentions are good, but we're all like, are working at odds with each other and how we can all start to work together better. But I think really, it really goes back to what I said there on any conversation you have. It's the initial conversation, then the trust that gets your foot in the door, but you've got to do things to build that trust. And if you're sitting there and you're like investing like, yeah, it started all right, but I don't like where this conversation is going. Okay. This does not mean that every single veteran you ever see, shoot, there's all kinds of things that happen where when you're in the service to go through that you're just like, I don't like this person. I don't trust what's going on. And that just because they got the veteran tag to go in and get out doesn't mean I have to work with them or I have to believe that they're doing the right thing. It is still it's that initial trust, and you got to continue to hold that trust because there's a lot of us that are out there, and I mean, you can face some of those that comes out, but I think it's up to you to go through. You can tell as you're having a conversation with somebody of, do they individually as a person, do they have the right intent in mind? And if that's the case, then you know that you can continue to move on. And if you lose that, then stop. It's simple as that.
I think it would be helpful to maybe hear a little bit of your background and like how you got into one, the business that you are in today, and then two, your interest in trying to support veterans in that way. I have come across very few businesses that are hinged around, oh, we're just here to support veteran founders and like doing it in a like a capital raising type sense. There are lots of like accelerators and business development programs, but I think that what you guys are doing at Localvest is a little bit different. So maybe just give me like a couple minute background on what gets you here and what starts to develop that passion for pushing veteran business forward.
Sure. So the first thing to talk about here is, so when I got out, I did a full-time MBA. And part of my reason to the full-time MBA is for what you said to go through. I'm like, I've never done a job interview in my life. Let's be honest. I probably use it as I don't know how to go out and make sure I'm finding the right job and what's even open to me. And I use that time to like widen my opportunities I have. I ended up getting a very good job. My wife was working as well. And as it started to come up and we worked through student loan pieces and all the other things that are going on, came to the point where we're accredited investors. And we could talk some about that and you can look at it, but essentially there are different levels of investors that you can do. And it has to do with how much either your income or your net worth that you have. But when that happens, that means that you can start to invest in other things. And so instead of just looking at the stock market, which is where my money was, so in public equities, then okay, there's the potential to go into real estate opportunities like syndications where you're a limited partner, private placements, like buying into early stage companies, right? There's all these new things. So I started to look around, okay, how do I do this? And I started asking people, how in the world, what options do I have available? Okay, I tell you what, give me, invest $25,000 here, invest $50,000 here, and then I'll show you exactly how this works. So you tell like that, you're just talking about the red flags to go through. I'm like, that sounds shady to me. Let's do that. And so I said, you know what? I don't feel comfortable. I did not feel comfortable. But what it actually took was a veteran who was several years ahead of me and had experience doing it and goes, all right, wait, here's how this works. And I figured out, like most things when it comes to it, the math was not complicated, but it did have a few different calculations and it did have a different language. And in fact, the difference between investing in real estate and investing in an early stage company and some other parts of the way that you can do private equity and some of those things, they use a lot of the same equations, but they'll flip the number. And in one case, it'll be a percentage and the other one, it'll be a ratio. It's the weirdest darn thing, but it's just a different language than I speak. You just need to have someone to show you, all right, here's how I evaluate an opportunity. Here's what I'd do if in your shoes. And I took that information and showed me like, okay, here's what to go learn. Here's what to go read. And so I did that. And then it was not immediate. It wasn't like the next immediate deal that came up. But when an opportunity came to invest, I actually invested with him months later because it was like, okay, this is the right kind of deal that fit in with what I was doing. So essentially a veteran was able to lead me along because here's how to think about this process. And so since then, I came to this part as an investor, as a veteran investor saying, how do I learn about how this operates? And that's how I was introduced actually to Localvest, what to do. But it was this idea of a veteran saying, if this is what you want to learn how to do, if this is the interest, the industry that you want to be involved in, here's how you can do it, right? There's been a few times that I've done that. And the veteran shows everything about how the process works. And says, you know what? I don't want to play that game. That does not excite me. And if it doesn't excite you, then don't get into it. And there's different ways that you can do it. But that's really how it started. And so from this point, I've got a lot of different real estate investments. I think I got all the branches covered at this point. I don't know Space Force because I don't know any Space Force people who've gotten out yet. I have not met a retired or someone who's left the service of Space Force yet, but I'm still waiting for my first Coast Guard deal, but I think that'll come here pretty soon. But that's how I got there, was as an investor. And I think it's that education piece that is so important. The one that I was saying of like, how do I do this? And having a veteran to be able to help me out in doing it. And that's what I was able to do on the platform. So what I ended up doing is lots of different things with life, but we ended up moving from Houston, where I was working in oil and gas, to Northern Virginia. And an opportunity came up. I'm like, okay, how can I do something with Localvest if there's an opportunity? And it's grown. And over the course of a few months, it got to the point and I was like, hey, I could be the CEO of Localvest. And so that's what I started in January of this year. And so I get to do this every day, which is, all right, how do we educate veterans who want to learn how to invest? And then how do we make sure that the veterans who have those opportunities put the best foot forward and get their deals funded?
So when you first got introduced to alternative investment vehicles other than just your 401k matching or whatever, was the allure of that from the start actually supporting veteran founders? Was it looking at potentially higher risk or maybe higher return potential? Or what was the actual draw to say, yes, I would like to make investments that require this accreditation, i.e., I have enough money to lose where I'm not going to be bankrupt, basically. And I'm financially savvy enough to like do the calculations to make these judgment calls.
No, it was actually the other way. It was the investment type first. And so there are rules on who can invest when and where and how it's done. But it's just, okay, you can actually go out and just look at what people are invested in. And as they go through and the more wealthy people go through, I'm like, what asset classes are they in? And then you go like, I don't have any of that in my portfolio. I'm like, how do I even go about doing that? Some things are still off limits just because of the price point that they're at. That's absolutely fine the way that it goes and growing from here. But the biggest part is, okay, I want to be in an asset class. But then it came to, okay, if I'm going to get in and I've never been in it before, it just got to the point as I'm looking, that's when I go through, I'm like, okay, how do I enter this? Yeah, like, how do I make my first real estate investment like that? And so when you ask it that way, that's when it started to go through. I'm like, oh, okay, now there's it's almost like walking into a new room and then realizing there's all these opportunities that you didn't realize existed before. And this, how do I narrow it down? How do I figure out what I'm interested in doing? And one of those criteria that was easier for me still is, are there groups of veterans that are doing that? Can you start with that as the entering argument and narrow that piece down and continue to drill down from there? So it was the assets first. And then it was like, who's doing this? And it just helped narrow down the list in a way that I wanted to narrow down the list. And so it really made a difference for me.
One of the things you said, you were talking about comparing your own personal portfolio to maybe those ahead of you or maybe those more wealthy than you. How much of alternative investing, in your opinion, is about diversification versus wealth creation? Because I'm trying to think through a couple of different perspectives here of maybe somebody who's already accredited and maybe has access to different things. It's good to have more access. And there's a lot of interesting platforms that are creating, like Republic and all these others, for allowing non-accredited investors to invest in like maybe riskier vehicles. But how should people be thinking about that? How is wealth creation possible in these types of things? Or is it more of the way that hedge funds think about it, and we're just going to put a bunch of stuff in a pot and to lower risk in a certain way?
So I'm not a wealth fund guy necessarily as it comes. In fact, I hire somebody who's able to talk through those things. But I think the biggest thing I can say though is they thinking about the long run of what you're trying to do. The distinction I get of what I'm saying is when I looked out and says, okay, where are not even large endowment, like where do people have their money, right? And they'll show like a pie chart to go through, and it was bothering me to go through that. Okay, there's like a whole section, like most people and go through and like higher wealth. And like there's a significant portion of their assets that are in real estate. And if you look at the portfolio and goes, I've got nothing in real estate, that's telling me something. I'm like, okay, I need to find a way to get into that. But I think where you have to start to get tripped up is if you're in a rush to try to get in and goes, I need to get myself to 25% real estate. I'm just picking a number here, whatever your numbers that you pick. And then you go and jump. I'm like, I need to sell a bunch of this stuff over here and move it in. And I need to do that in the next 12 months. I think that starts to get in that recipe of disaster where you feel like you're starting to try to use certain returns, or you're looking for the things that are biggest bang for the buck. Everything's front loaded as opposed to, okay, I'm here with my portfolio. Here's how the pie chart looks. And then here's where I want it to be. And to have a conversation, especially if you have a wealth manager to go through, or just the type of person that you can have a conversation about that with. I'm like, look, I want to get into this asset class. I want to have this as part of my portfolio. And I want to know how to be able to make that transition, but not be thinking of it. I need to get in this now because I think this is a boom market. This is where everybody is. And I want to put a bunch of money toward it. Instead, just go, how do I start to evaluate the opportunities to get in there? There are certain opportunities that I still would like to get into that I have not pulled the trigger on it just because I have not found a way for me that I'm comfortable with yet to actually get into that asset class. But when I do, I'm ready, but I've been thinking about it. It's almost like one of those things that when I see the opportunity as the right one, I'll know it, but it's because I've been looking at it for a long time of, okay, what does right look like? Right. I think we all have that, right? You too, even as an entrepreneur, like what, you're an entrepreneur and you say, this is how will I know what business I want to get into? Is you'll know, you see it like that. I can't tell you what it is right now, but I know what the criteria are that when it does show up, you're like, I'm ready to move because I've been looking for this for the past 6 months or a year. And then you're able to move forward for that. So that's really how I think about it, is that where I want to be in the long run and how I want this thing to look over the next 20 or 30 years, as opposed to, this is the model that tell me I need to do, and I'm going to jump in and I'm going to rearrange my entire portfolio in the next 12 months to make it look like that, because that's what everybody tells me I need to do.
You mentioned that there's a couple asset classes that you are interested in, but maybe haven't had the right opportunity come up. Maybe it'd be helpful to break down what you view as like the asset classes are that are available to an accredited investor. Maybe what are the ones that you're looking at that maybe you haven't found the right opportunity in? And what do you think are the most popular? And I don't want to say attractive from like a returns perspective, but maybe what is popular, maybe not from a returns perspective, but maybe the most common when you hit that point and you're looking to maybe make some alternative investments.
So if you think like you had mentioned in there, like a 401k, right? And I look at what my 401k, the portfolio of things that can go in there, you're essentially talking about different sizes of stocks and some bonds, right? So pretty much publicly traded opportunities, right? So when you start to get out of that, it goes into first, real estate is probably one of the biggest one people do. In fact, like I was a junior officer 2006, earlier than that, to go through, and I bought a rental property on my own, right, to go through, and I incorporated to go through. It was a hot time to do it at the time when I was going through, and I kept those for quite a long time. But then it was like, okay, when I did that, I was a landlord. I was dealing with the day to day. And so what's a more simpler way to go? So you start to get into the accredited part. The biggest part is you can own smaller shares through a syndication, right? And so you can make an investment and not be the active partner when it goes. I think the natural one a lot of people get into is a real estate syndication. So that's where you're buying a property, there's a general manager, and then you have a share of that property and you're not part of the day-to-day operations. So that starts to become one that's in there. And there's all sorts of versions of that. And you could go in over a long time about what, even within that asset class of, okay, Multifamily has been very popular for a long time to go through, like industrial, office, other commercial space, just land. There's different development things to go, and there's all different versions in there. So there's that piece. And then it starts to go into how do you invest in different companies, like a private placement. So you can go into early stage companies. So companies that are just getting started, how could you invest in those? Is its own asset class. So just essentially private markets that way. But then I think there's the other ones too that are variations of that private equity to go through. So someone may own a portfolio of different companies that are operating. And instead of owning individual companies, you can either be in a fund like a venture fund or private equity fund, and how you can participate that way starts to get in there. And then I think it starts to get into other asset classes. Some of those things you go, I didn't even know you could own them. So this would be start to get into things like people own royalty rights to music. They may own mineral rights, like we need like oil and gas, right? And so these other things, they're businesses, but it has a commodity play to it. And then of course, what I'm continually surprised about too, is there's whole alternative investment assets that are out there that people are essentially making businesses off of them, and they're able to trade them. And it's trying to think of some very good examples, but almost all of them are just like something that's very unique. So you can do shooting like this, like does someone own like livestock, right? And how in the world that whole world works, and usually gets tied up with real estate when you do it. But essentially all these different types of assets, it's just things that you don't talk about. You can't walk into your regular broker and say, how do I go and buy livestock? So it's usually that's what I'm saying too, as you grow into it, how much money do you have that you would be able to put in an investment like that? And there's some investments that are just significantly larger than most people can make, if I can make to go through. And so it's just a matter of, there's all these different asset classes that you can go into and do. I don't know if that helps to go through if you had certain questions on those, because there's a lot to it. I'd say the biggest thing is the opportunity that as it goes along with the opportunity to invest into a private company, something that's not publicly traded, where you're actually signing a contract deal and putting money in, and usually that money is tied up for a longer period of time. Essentially, you're writing an individual contract with the owner or the operator to be invested in whatever that enterprise or opportunity is. And to get out of it, it usually involves another contract relationship thing, as opposed to I can make a trade. I can go online on a platform. I can call a broker and we can be in and out because it's being publicly traded. When you get out of that, there's just this whole world of things that can be exciting. It's not something that you have to invest in all of them, but there are so many different opportunities that are out there to learn about, figure out how they work, and decide if you even want to play in that space and add it to your portfolio.
One of the cool things that I have come to find in just the investing sphere is you can really place a financial bet about how you think that the future will look. Is the way that I think about investing is, if you believe that a company or a person or whatever, maybe even it's a whole asset class, is going to be bigger and better in the future, you can put your wallet behind that. And I think from something that you said about the veteran perspective, like you can help push that into the future in some way. What are some things that you are maybe optimistic or bullish about long term, whether it be, obviously we know that you're super behind the veteran space, but are there certain like sub asset classes or certain types of businesses under the umbrella of I enjoy investing in veteran founders that you think are particularly interesting for your own portfolio? And we can give all the disclosures about this is not financial advice and all that fun stuff, but like, just curious, what are you optimistic about for the future?
There's always this interesting part with real estate that we put real estate, but there are a few veterans that I know that are working in space, and they just really figured out their area, and that
Mhm.
there are different, we say real estate, that is not this monolithic thing that's out there and like real estate is up or real estate is down. It's this whole nuanced group of things that are classified as real estate. So you can invest in short-term debt like development funds or hard money lending, or just making loans to develop a piece of property and hold it for a short period of time. You can do long-term debt like banks are making, and you can be a part of that. You can be a part of wholesaling where you find properties, put them together, or even convert, like you do something to improve that land or that asset that you bought and then resell it to someone so you hold a short period of time. Or you could buy and hold for a long period of time, and you can do that with all these different assets. So it's like at any given point, and you choose where it's going to be. So you like look within an asset class, and there are always things that are moving within real estate that I think is interesting. So I, can't tell you like exactly what the thing should be for you right now. It's up to you on how you do it. But I think that idea of there's always something at play. There's always an opportunity that's developing and opening up. And so finding that can be really exciting within real estate. So when you look at somebody, if you look at somebody in their portfolio, wow, they've really won with real estate over periods of time. I can tell you, I've seen it. There's plenty of ups and downs if you were to think about real estate as like one thing. And if you only invested in this generic exposed to the real estate market, if you get in and you're able to have you do your own assessment on how it goes, but there are always things in certain communities like may work in one community and not work in another. She goes, yes, this is an opportunity I want to be invest in. And if you do that, that's how people are able to make returns 20, 30 years that outpace what others are doing because they're seeing some of those trends and looking for something that's happening. And then I think just in general, I think it's pretty popular now on purchasing existing businesses is I think a pretty exciting space to be in. And then just always in general too about just entrepreneurship, starting companies. I see it from the veteran standpoint about what they're doing, but there are always people who are pushing the envelope about a business idea that they have, a concept that's going to be out there. These businesses that people are doing are going to be the future. And there's always an opportunity to see those. And I'm bullish on together. I can't tell you what individual companies are going to do, but the excitement that people have that even in the face of could be some pretty bad conditions that they will still find a way to succeed. And so there's always opportunities that are out there. In general, I'm bullish that real estate holds its value over time as it goes, that there's opportunities somewhere at high, like that some things will not do well, but in general, real estate, there's opportunities that are there and it has its value and you have to find that value that makes sense for you and where you think it's going. And then just the resilience of the United States is still the best place to be when you want to start a company. People come here to start companies is what they want to do. And that in total, like net, there's going to be winners and losers and things that go well, but this is the place to start a company. And this is the place where we're going to see the best things develop in the world. And they'll be taken to a bunch of other places from here. And this is the place to do it. And so you can find a way to be a part of that. I think I'm always bullish on that.
Always bet on America. That's a
great bet on America. I think it really worked. The mentality, it is such a weird to see that when it goes, we lose sight of it or many other places. But if you think about that perspective, okay, well, if you're going to start whatever your idea is, almost always that thing's going to say best place to do it probably here. And if you start to think maybe I should go, and then usually you correct yourself. No, I think this is the place to start. If I was going to start one, it would probably be in the United States. I know there's exceptions to that. Someone could tell me one to go through, but odds are if you're telling me what you want to do, it's a good thing you're picking here somewhere in the US.
I couldn't agree more. And it's challenging and it's frustrating for me to hear when people want to throw stones. This kind of leads into a discussion about capitalism and like what that is and the fundamentals of kind of wealth creation. But there is no place where the rules, like the tax code, the laws, all of these things are so designed to promote people to bet on themselves and to do something. Whether that's like the whole like 1031 exchange conversation about whether people should be able to invest in real estate and kind of roll over the proceeds and starting companies and like the favorable tax benefits you get from R&D. And there's all of these things that people say that's bad. And it's like, no, it's like, I can see why, but the whole point is that what we're trying to do long-term is to develop economic activity and encourage and inspire people to go and build and to, whether it's homes, whether it's companies, like all of these things, the laws are set up to promote and inspire that. And I think if you want to stand on the sidelines and talk about how bad that is, you're not going to get very far on that because the entire history of our country is based around that sort of idea.
That is exactly true. Very true.
There was a quote recently I heard, I'm going to butcher it, but it's something like pessimists are usually right, but optimists end up rich or something like that. And it comes back to that same idea about if you're willing to take risk and to build something, it's the opportunity to be rewarded for it there's no better place here than the United States. That's for sure.
There's an interesting, if I can, like a take on this, of just something I just want to talk, if someone's listening to this, to go through, is what that idea of taking a risk means. There are a few times that I'll have conversations, and it happens more often than not to go through, is there's a lot of planning and not a lot of doing when it comes to starting an idea, like starting from an idea and turn it into a business. And I encourage a lot of you to go through is to look at the different ways to get started and start. And what I mean by that is you could sit there and you could find your way. I'm not saying don't plan, but I've had several opportunities where essentially that the planning took over the entire process. Creating an LLC is not necessarily taking the first step. It's really about going out and seeing if there's a market for what you want to do. And something like, if I was going to, I'm trying to think something very capital intensive, but if you're going to build something massive, SpaceX, okay, and or all like some of those guys, what they're doing, where they're building massive, essentially you need a lot of capital put in place to actually make the enterprise go. That's one thing, and they need to raise a lot of money. There's a lot of other things though that you can start to test out and get the product going. If you were to go out and to start selling something, whatever it is, and then brought your newfound mess to go, I am stuck, I don't know what to do, people will help you. All right. So if you figure out I can make this contract work, I'm going to bid on it, or I'm going to move forward with it, or whatever it is to go through, and you make a sale and you're like, okay, I know I should at least be able to make as much as I'm going to have to spend to make this happen. And I'll hopefully break even or pretty close in there to go through. You can always optimize off of that, but you've made a sale and this can be done. And so risk does not mean you need to make this massive thing and you need to take out a bunch of loans, or people need to give you a lot of money and invest in you to make this massive project that still has not sold everything. That happens. Those are the stories that we hear about, right? Like a lot of these big companies, like they bet everything that they had, but there are lots of other ways to take a risk. And sometimes that risk is taking your idea and actually putting it in front of somebody and making the first sale. And it could be a $10 sale or a $100 sale, but it gets you moving. And that is a risk for you. Like you're selling something, you've never done that before. You could get rejected to go through, but your risk does not have to be, so what I'm saying is I got this idea and now I need to have $10 million on the line and I'm bankrupt if this thing doesn't work. There are cases where that makes sense to do that, but I want to encourage all of you to realize that there's entire stretch or seriatim of different things that you can do that involve taking a risk to become an entrepreneur. And again, that's the part I think that is here is the best place for that to happen here in the United States, to go through and to actually take those steps forward. And if you get that process started, you make that first sale, you have the best chance of success and the best tools and resources that you can use to be able to move from sale 1 to sale 100 and beyond, to go through and get it running into a full-fledged business.
There are a couple past episodes where I drilled into sales, specifically Hal Fisher, who actually introduced us, and then Christian Ruff. And both of those conversations dug into this idea of how important making that first sale is. And people can go back and listen to those, but essentially you have no validation of your idea until you sell it to somebody. And you have like basically no data to improve until you can make that first sale. Why is that so counterintuitive, people?
I'm not sure, but if you think, we talk about, so what we're doing like Localvest and the way that it works, companies are coming and they're saying, I want to have investment dollars for my business. So not selling a product to a customer, it's someone investing alongside you because they believe that you can do it. And I don't know if it's a matter of just taking off one hat and just thinking, well, what would it feel like to be on the other side of the table? And so if you're sitting there going through, I'm like, I've got this idea. I need you to give me a lot of money, but I don't have any proof that it's going to work. Now imagine if that same person, one person says that to you, right? And then, okay, you get up and you move to the next table and have a conversation with someone and they're able to say, look, I have a deal, but I'm using really expensive capital, right? Like I'm using my credit card to fund this, or I've got some other things. I could really use equity because it would allow me to make a better return. But here's my sales cost. Here's my cost of goods sold. Here's what it costs me to run my business. I just need this thing to be more efficient. How much easier of an investment sale? Oh, okay. When you talk about, okay, like I say, you're a veteran to go through and have that conversation and get your foot in the door. The next step when it comes to investors, no matter what your enterprise is, from the smallest of companies and you're just looking for a few dollars to get kicked off, to the most expensive venture out there to go through, every single one of them is they're looking for some part of that proof. And it's like the more of those boxes you check before you start, the better off you are. And the biggest one is, have you sold anything? Or even if you haven't sold anything, is it out or we can actually tell that this thing is in use, right? Like I'm beta testing it. Like, hey, I've got this in the hands of 1,000 users and here's what the feedback that they've given me about the product. And it's actually, Doc, you can do something with it and that you're adjusting. I haven't sold any, but I've got this. It helps, right? So the idea of funding an idea and funding a lot of money for it, think of how hard of a sale that is. What would it have to take to convince you? And if it's hard to convince you, can you do any step of that journey? I'll tell you the most successful people on our platform are the ones that have done as many of those other steps. And it's not just, hey, we have a relationship, we know each other to go through. So we have a relationship, but here are these other things that my company proves that it's a viable thing for you to invest in. You're pulling risk off the table. And every time you do that, it's awesome. So that's why I like it when Hal said it to others, just go sell something. If you can sell something or you can get the product out there where people are providing feedback, it is the most valuable thing you can do. Because you think about, if you don't have that, you're going to have to put more risk. You're essentially going to have to value your enterprise in a different way that takes into account that risk. If you sold things, you understand, okay, you can already see there's a demand for this here. That when someone says, hey, we need to change the valuation or how much of this company I'm going to own for the amount of money I'm going to put in, because there's a lot of risk here for me. And the more that you can pull off, then it's more of your ownership that you can protect when you're out trying to get an investor to come in to join you in whatever your enterprise is.
It's so funny how many weird little excuses that you hear about why, or like people have an idea but can't pursue it because X, or when usually money is one of them. And that is, I think, in my opinion, what the heart of entrepreneurship is: being able to find some semblance of validation, whether it's making a sale in spite of having the resources that you think that you need. That's the whole point, because the entire journey is basically doing something maybe that nobody has done before, or certainly is new to you. And that won't be the first time that you have to overcome that. Hey, I'm trying to do this, but I don't have this, which is what I think I need. How can I still reach that objective in spite of that lack of resources? And I think that there's certainly I think everybody can be an entrepreneur. I think some people need more kind of mental training. I would put myself in the category of needing that mental training for spending a lot of years making excuses as to why things can't happen. But I think it's a difficult jump for certain.
It is a difficult jump. And I will tell you the other thing, and I people have said this before, and I keep coming back to this one is that it is that execution, right? It's making that jump or several jumps in there and doing what you're talking about. That idea that you have is probably worth like a fraction of the overall value of what's happening, because if you haven't done anything with it, there's a lot of us that are out running through ideas, right? And you make like a list of all the different things you start. Some of my best podcast things I listen to, like very successful people, and they're just like, hey, here's a bunch of ideas. And they're throwing all these business ideas. And you think, oh my goodness, there are all these gems in there. It's like, and they're coming that realization too, is like, I'm only one person, or there's a group of us that are doing things. There's only so many things that you can do. And so there's all these different ideas. And the winner's going to be the one that can go out and actually turn it into something, start executing. You can actually go out and market it and make something happen. And that's where all the value is. If you start that step, if you have the idea and you take those first few steps, you're going to be light years ahead, right? It's going to put you in the best at you. You go into a bank and ask for a loan. If you go for alternative debt, right? Like just going out and looking for private debt where someone to buy into your business, they're going to put more value on your idea and what you have done. So that you don't have to give all of your company away so early on because you're just like, yeah, I got this idea. Can you fund me to get this thing off the ground? Wow, you probably could have started this while you were working there. I don't know if you've come across this, Brock. I am shocked. I don't remember there being as many people on active duty who were starting companies. Maybe it's easier now to go through, or there's like a different breed of people who are serving. But I am very shocked at the number of people who do take that first step and get something started. And they're like, I'll have a conversation with them and they're about ready to start going. I'm like, yeah, actually, I got 3 more months before I'm out. I'm like, oh my God. You're like, maybe I shouldn't have just come home and sat on the couch so much after duty. It's pretty impressive, but they're not doing it. It's pretty neat.
It really is. And I think that's so good. That is
Yeah.
so important because one, you're doing a couple of things. One, you're putting your skills to use. I think don't need to explain that. That's a good thing. The more important thing there, and why I try to encourage people to do something while they're on active duty, even if it's just a side hustle on the weekend, is one, it's going to help your transition. Like one, and that there's 2 parts of that. You have the opportunity to maybe that could become your full-time gig afterwards. Like maybe you start a pressure washing business on the side, your last few months of active duty. Maybe you can go full-time on that and maybe that becomes your job. That's cool. That's a big win. The second order effects of that though, are it also gives you a purpose that spans from active duty into your kind of like transition to civilian life. And it's not this steep drop off of where you just get out of service and then all of a sudden you're in this whole new environment. Nothing is the same. It's not the same people. It's not the same job. Everything is different. You have something that covers both of them. So it's that kind of consistency, I think is good for people because it gives them something to hold on to. It's, I'm not going to, and our case, the Navy, we're not going to the sub or the ship every day, but I still am doing this one thing. I'm just doing more of it. And I think that's one of my working theories about why entrepreneurship can be a really good thing for vets, and especially in transition, is because it can help ease that process more. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree with you. So, and it does not have to be wild and crazy to do it. And I guess if we even go beyond entrepreneurship to go through, I think it's that if we're talking about your active duty now and when you're transitioning out to go through, that there's something other than you, sailor, airman, soldier, Marine, that you have something other ways to define yourself, as you say, to go through. If it is an entrepreneurship, that's even great because I've seen a few people, there's quite a few. The ones they're more resilient, right? And they carry on what they were doing in the military and that entrepreneurship thing, it just gives them more confidence when they go out. I can figure this out. And there's a lot of people who have changed up what they're doing, but you don't have to choose them to say, do I want to do this for the next 40 years of my life? No, but the skills are going to be worth it. And that's the biggest thing I think that you take from there. And it's like, who knows what you're going to be doing? When you're you end up every 2 or 3 years, usually, sometimes 4 to go through, you may change up and do something like completely different. And I was in the same thing on the corporate side. You'd go in and you do a job, and every few years, they'd send you a whole new group and a whole new different skill set that you'd use for the job itself. But then you just kept coming back to these things that you learn while you're doing entrepreneurship. Like you said in there, I'm like learning from like a side gig, pressure washing to go through, but that process of what it takes to actually sell something and make money from doing it, you could translate into anything. So you do not need to go, I don't know if I want to pressure wash for the rest of my life. You don't have to. You could do it for a few months. It could be a summer thing only, or you could turn it into an amazing thing. Who knows? It's just getting out there and doing it.
There is this big overhang to having your logo set up. And like you mentioned earlier, you're alluding to it, like getting your LLC and like just all of this weird admin stuff that actually does not matter at all. And it's very easy to get caught up in that. Another really toxic one, I personally haven't been afflicted with that plague, but I certainly have gotten caught up in like the content loop of just maybe I need to read another book before I can start something or listen to another podcast, or just this loop of feeling like you don't have enough information. And again, I think that the whole point is working through something in spite of that, try and make a sale, learn from it, and then continue to grow and develop from there.
Agreed. Agreed. We mean more of that, right? It needs to be, there's a couple groups I've gone through on, like on the real estate side. It was, just that bias towards action really helps. And if you struggle with that, as you go out, try to find groups that have the bias towards action. If you're joining accelerators or you are joining different mastermind groups, whatever, try to find the ones that are going to push you to do something, even if it's uncomfortable for you. That's probably the best antidote that I can think to that right now. You'll still be learning, right? And you can still always do another book to go through, but at the end of it, they're going to tell you like, look, at the end of this month, you need to take a step or 2 steps or whatever it is and lay it out, the beginnings of doing it. Like, look, if we're sitting here right now as October to go through, you got that idea and you want to go through, but at the end of November, you got to sell something. And if you think you got to do other stuff to go through, at the end of the day though, you have to do that real tangible step. And I still believe what you're saying there to go through. There's a lot of things that if you make the first sale, like we just did on the real estate one, if you get a deal under contract, you now have a clock behind you, I mean, like 30, 45 days. So I'm like, okay, there's a bunch of stuff I can figure out. I'm like, hey, if you have the fear of the Lord in you, then I got to do a close in 45 days and I cannot buy this by myself. I want it to be under an entity. You will find the attorney to help you set up an LLC and your structure. And most of the times, like someone who's helping you set up, like if you're buying it from somebody, if you need to like, hey, I need to change my entity because I'm actually going to move this into an LLC instead of me purchase it, and they'll sign that thing and go through. It's amazing the types of things you can do, but it's that bias of saying, I need this. If you make a sale, you can always go back and fix those things. Like, can't say always to go through, but almost everything you're going to be able to go backwards and get figured out. You will be able to put your systems in place if you need to. You don't have to buy QuickBooks to start. You make a few sales and go, this kind of stinks in the spreadsheet. Now I'll buy QuickBooks. Much easier. And then you have money to run it with, as opposed to setting all your categories up right in QuickBooks and go through them. Like, now I just need to go make sales. That's the hard one, right? That's that risk I've already put $5,000 into this thing and I haven't sold anything and I actually don't know if it's going to work. Mm-hmm. That's the painful one.
It's so funny because something that every veteran probably has on their resume to some degree is the ability to work under pressure. And there is no greater pressure than what you've just described when you've sold something or are under some sort of obligation to purchase something and you don't have the resources lined up to do it. And
yeah, that's very true.
That will, like you said, put the fear of the Lord in you.
That's right. That's right. And we, like before we started, we were talking about the tools you use to record. And yeah, I was even talking about things further on, like, but you just started. You started with like the free version of the very low end version. I'm like, okay, now I've figured out, is this going? Now I need to improve the quality, whatever quality is for the thing. You just go, okay, I need a few other features, but then you actually know if you need the features and what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely true.
Exactly. Let's talk about Localvest. You were talking about what you guys do, but maybe just start from the bare bones. Nobody's ever heard of Localvest. What is it that you guys do? What is the offering? Who's it for? And we'll hash out why what you guys are building is so valuable.
Sure. So what we are is a marketplace to connect veteran-led investment opportunities with investors. And most of the time that means a veteran, or it could be someone who's friendly to veterans. And we do several things in that space. So the biggest one is when you are going to go out and you're going to raise, at this point, equity capital, right? So not going out and getting a loan or a private debt, but you want to have someone invest in your company. You create what we call as a deal tile. And so this is your way to sum up what your opportunity is about. So it could be a startup business. It could be a real estate syndication. The ideas are endless when it comes to it, but you need someone to invest in you. Then the deal tile that you create is like a single URL that you can put all the things about your company together. So not a deal room. So if you do the documents like a private placement memorandum or the contracts on stuff, that's all the legal stuff that goes there. I'm talking about what it is that you're selling as something to invest in. You can put those things on the page. A lot of times it's pitch decks, videos, pictures, a summary about what the product is about. But then it also has a way to follow the deal or opportunity and a way to schedule time with you. We have a calendar link. And now, every time that you're going out, not talking to customers, but you're talking to someone who potentially can invest in you, you can share just that single URL, or you can make a QR code for it to go, oh, you're interested in investing. Here's more information. Here's how you can talk to me about my opportunity as an investment. So Localvest allows you that place to do that. And we have a collection of all of those field files. Everybody who's on the site is somehow veteran related. So a veteran founder or like a veteran in the C-suite, right? So you don't have to all be veterans, but there's a veteran who's in there making the day-to-day decisions. That's what you're going to find on the site. And then what we're able to do from there is we can promote the opportunity. So some people just create the tile and share it within their own network. And it just makes it easier to keep track of who's looking at your opportunity. So we actually have a way in the background when you log in, if someone watches your video or you have, let's say 5 documents on there, someone has downloaded all 5 of those documents, or they're just looking for a way to be able to communicate with you, you can see that and tailor the message because you have to nurture that relationship, right? So it's very rare someone puts an opportunity out in front of somebody and it's like you're waiting for the phone to ring, right? Oh, yeah, no problem. They'll find me. Usually it's you have to facilitate the conversation. So you have the first conversation, you meet them, but you're following up with them. You're showing them new materials that you have. You're inviting them to an event where they can see you virtually online or meet with you, and you're able to track all those things. Then there's other ways that we can promote. So you actually, if you're an investor, you can come in and you can see all of those tiles. It says, I only want to see real estate. I only want to see startup companies, maybe certain types of startup companies. I want to invest in certain funds. You can narrow it down and you can find that investment. The biggest thing is we're a matchmaking service. The best way to think of it is that's an opportunity. You see the opportunity, you connect with that person, and then you go off and you have an investor conversation. And that's what we are all about, making as many of those connections as we can with a veteran-led company and someone who wants to invest in them.
Raising capital is such like a painful exercise for
Yeah.
people, and like finding people to do that, especially if you're new to that space for the reasons we were highlighting earlier in this conversation, maybe lack of network, that becomes that much more critical. Can you maybe give me a sense for like how long has Localvest been around, and maybe some idea around like how many ideas have been like listed on the platform, any sort of idea metrics or things like that that could indicate your guys' influence on veteran related companies, we'll call them?
Sure. So we've been going for, I think it's been about 5 years now. In its current iteration, we've really been focusing on veterans because it started on a non-veteran way to go through. It's founded by a veteran. It says, why don't we just focus on veterans? And it took off, right? The actual intent when you look at Localvest was the local part, which was people investing with people that they know from a community. But then we also there's also the way that you affiliate with things, right? And who you're connected with. And that when we said veterans, being a veteran's an affiliate community, and that took off, right? And we realized that there is a huge desire for veterans to invest in veterans for all the things that we've been talking about for this entire conversation. So it's really been a couple years that we've been doing that. We've had several hundred opportunities that have gone forward. It started out of a real estate iteration. I mean, it really started as a real estate platform to start. And now we've really been getting more into startups and into funds. A lot of the real estate ones have been extremely successful. We're seeing a lot more people coming in and finding success with the startups. And so the most successful ones, it's raising their startup. It's like a pre-seed or a seed. But think of someone who have gone to friends and family and they're raising a few $100,000 to maybe $1 million to go through. That's our sweet spot because you're talking about individual angel investors making an investment anywhere from 25,000 maybe up to 100,000 or plus, but most of them are in that lower end range when they're making an investment. Sometimes real estate goes a little bit higher because the risk profile is different from investing in a startup company versus going into real estate. But we facilitated probably 100 different companies invest in, if not more, to go through. It's a little weird because I just tell people, I like to think of it in our current iteration, the way that we are, is it's a lot like LinkedIn. Because if you think of like LinkedIn as a marketplace, right? It's a way to connect with people. If someone posts on LinkedIn, I have a job opportunity. If your company says I have a job opportunity, or if you post, I'm looking for work, you can make that connection on LinkedIn and you'll never pay LinkedIn any money for that connection. And they would have no idea that you offered a job and someone connected on a job that happened on LinkedIn unless you told them. And so a lot of cases, there's these connections that are happening and we have no idea on our platform. But there are ways though that you do on LinkedIn where you can do pay to promote your job opportunity or that you are looking for work. And that's some of the things that we're able to do. But we talk about the platform to come in, make that initial deal tile. That part is free. And we try to encourage as many of those connections to happen without having to go out and promote. But if you do need to promote, which would mean going out in emails, we could do paid social media. You can go out and use LinkedIn and Facebook to promote your opportunity. We can help you do that if you've never done it, but you'll have to. But that's the type of success that we've seen. But unfortunately, because it's this marketplace, we don't necessarily know all the connections that have been made, unfortunately.
How is it that you guys make money to keep going? Like you guys are marketplace businesses are tough because you're managing like the supply side and demand side. You need people on both of those things. And like you said, you're facilitating transactions, whether it be financial or maybe even interpersonal things that are happening maybe away from you guys. So how is it that you guys are able to kind of sustain continuing to facilitate those kind of connections?
So right now, I can tell you there's what we're doing and what I would like to see that it goes to, or just different options the way it goes, because it could morph a bit. Right now we have it though that the investors don't have to pay anything. We just want people to be able to come in, they see opportunities and be able to make those connections. And like I say, you can create the deal tiles and do that for free. But the real payment where we're making money is if an issuer, so someone raising capital, needs to promote their opportunity. They're currently paying to do that promotion. So essentially paying for exposure, right? Just like the best correlation I can think is like advertising, right? And that's what you're doing. You're paying to get in front of more investors, right? That's the model, the way that it's set up. Like say we can do it with advertising and get out that way. I would love for it to be able to spread out some of the way that relationship works so that either the upfront cost and promotion can continue to drop down, or there's just other ways that it supplements. And it could just be providing other services through the platform other than just investing. And if that happens that way, it could go. So someone has services to provide either investors or to those issuers that do in companies that can help defray some of those costs. And we're looking for other ways to have partnerships that are like it. But right now, that's the way that it is set up. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are intentionally not a registered broker dealer. So this is not, you make that investment and therefore we have a percentage take on that. That's what it means when you've got a broker relationship to go through. And we're not currently doing that. And it's on purpose with the relationship we have, that marketplace, that open marketplace. So we're limited in a little bit of how we can do. There's a few things that we're trying to figure out in the background. Can we streamline that to make it that you don't have to make it look like advertising that front and maybe work another way to do the compensation piece? But we've got to keep the lights on the platform to be able to do that. I'll tell you to also this idea of you can do it like a real estate syndication or a fund. They're constantly raising funds. But if you're a smaller company starting out, how can we best incentivize to make that relationship happen and have the funding mechanism all work out in an expected way? And there's a few different ways that we're trying to figure that out now and continue to improve. So I would say, I know what we're doing today, it looks very different from what we did 2 years ago, probably 2 years from now. Hopefully it means we're open up to even more people. There's more opportunities to come in, and it's not just purely paying to promote to be able to get yourself in front of investors. If there's other opportunities that are out there that works.
What is your guys' biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge I would tell you is don't create a dual-sided marketplace. A dual-sided marketplace. If you guys, the best book on that is the Cold Start Option. I don't know if you've read that one to go through talking about, and a lot of times we talk about dual-sided marketplaces, like Uber's a dual-sided marketplace, right? Amazon's a dual-sided marketplace, Etsy, but any spot where you've got to have the product that you're selling is also that you essentially have to provide that service as well. So you need to have, in the case of Uber, you have to have the drivers, you have to seek people who are going from point A to point B, and then you have to have the drivers who are going to take them from point A to point B. And it's great listening to that book of this constant battle. Sometimes you need more issuers, right? Or sorry, sometimes you need more drivers, and sometimes there's a bunch of drivers looking around and they're all leaving the platform because there's no one to drive. And so you're constantly doing that battle back and forth. So right now, the biggest thing that we're seeing is more investors, right? So I love it if people are like trying to figure out what they want to invest in to come in. That currently today, you can even look at the macro level, the number of investments that are being made in individual companies, like what we've been talking about here, across all spectrum in the US is drastically down. So you can see the same thing. The number of the VC, like venture fund investments that are being made is significantly down compared to 2 years ago. But not long from now, it could be a spot where that comes back in balance. There's a bunch of investors saying, where are all the issues? So it's great to have more issues investors. But I would say the hardest challenge is just trying to keep that in balance, and say right now the balance is you need more people as they're looking at opportunities as to how to get some more investors. But I'm also love talking with people about how can I widen out the types of companies that people can invest in the platform, because I think that's the next big step as well, because there's a lot of things that we can't do today that I would really love to be able to serve a veteran with a different business type opportunity trying to seek investment.
Just like brainstorming here, like it seems like there would be some sort of natural extension to get hooked up with Bunker Labs, or there's a handful of other kind of veteran related accelerators that seem like it would be the perfect kind of handshake deal between you guys, at least create some sort of partnership or whatever, because they're more so on like the business development side as opposed to the actual capital raising.
That is exactly right. In fact, we talk with them. There's several of the accelerators that go through and have that conversation with them. And yes, with Bunker, like PenFed's got a program as well to go through. It's still trying to figure out just the right way to be able to work with them an opportunity. Because you're right, most people, I will tell you, go through, if anybody's out there talking about different opportunities, that there are a lot of veteran-based accelerators. And the best part of the veteran-based accelerators is, we call them free. It's free for you, but essentially they're sponsored and people really want you to succeed. And so they're putting the money in those programs. So if you don't know where to start, there's a lot of times I refer people to programs like Bunker Labs or PenFed's Masters, their Veterans Entrepreneurship Program, DAV's got a great one. There's a ton of them. I'm not mentioning to go through. It doesn't mean I don't support it. There's a lot of them. The key of them to go through though is they do that, and it's get in there and use those resources as much as you can. But then it seems like a lot of them still come out of accelerate programs. And they're talking about this capital piece. So yes, I think that natural bridge. Okay, you complete the program, which should help you with a lot of things, setting up your company and what you need to do. But then it turns out like, okay, how do I get capital investment into my company? And that we can play in that space to go through. So many people make that natural jump. I'm going to go look for venture fund, and that is not what their company needs. And so that's what I meant. How do we widen out if someone has a unique type of an opportunity? We need to find them with the investor who's excited about investing in that opportunity with them.
One of the things that you had told me, a stat that I thought was really interesting, that like less than 1% of companies are actually venture backed. Is that right?
That is correct. So if you think about it, it's probably worth talking about this, that people say, oh, I'm going to go look for funding. I'm going to go talk to some venture funds. I'm going to go get some VC funding. I think it's because it's the same thing go through when I'm going to go get a loan. You think I'll walk into my personal bank down the street, or like the bank down the street that I've had a savings account since I was a kid. And those are like two of an almost infinite number of different ways to raise capital. And so that's exactly right. We see the big companies that are publicly traded, the ones that have huge valuations, most of them got VC funding. Okay. Most of them did get venture capital funding. I think most of you out there would love to have the next Facebook or Google or some massive size company, but the odds are you probably don't have it. I don't mean that to be a mood killer, right? Or like to demotivate you on doing it. But I want you to realize that just because you are not one of those does not mean that you don't have an opportunity to make an unbelievable business that will make you rich, that will make your employees rich, that will make the world a better place. There are so many different ways to go out there. And so you do not need to have venture backed funding, because venture funding in most cases is looking for you to grow at a massive rate. They're expecting you to be a company that is hundreds of millions of dollars in valuation. They want you to be one of those big unicorns, right? That we call in there, huge valuations, massive companies that takes over markets, right? But know that there are a bunch of other people that if you're not really look like, you have to squint to try to make yourself look like that. Maybe I can get there. You're leaving all these other sources of funding on the table. And that's what we're trying to figure out here is there are other people who realize that, hey, if you don't do 100% growth year over year or more, you can be 20 to 50% growth. How many companies would you love to have that you have invested in that have 20 to 50% growth? I will gladly struggle way through to figure out how to make that work. Most real estate opportunities do not look like that. So people are looking for different things in their portfolio. I think it's important to realize that as you go through those accelerators, come out of those accelerators, or you're trying to start up your company, that there are lots of different types of investors who need to find an opportunity, like who are looking for an opportunity like yours. It's just trying to pair them. And the hard part, the VC fund has a website. They usually have an investment thesis that you can read. Goes, that sounds like me. And you can submit your pitch, like they'll tell you to fill out a form, right? So it's almost like looking for your keys under the lamp, because that's where the light is, as opposed to, I didn't lose it over here. You may need the flashlight to go, look, we want Localvest to be one of the spots. If you're a veteran doing this, you can find an investor that has your criteria, and it may not be that massive, crazy growth to be the next Facebook or Google. It could be something much smaller to go through, but again, amazingly lucrative for everybody involved and make the world a better place. Because that is what most of the US is, companies like that.
And I think it highlights too what you're saying, putting that number in perspective. It should quickly show you that most people build businesses not through this way where you're getting money from other people. It starts with figuring it out on your own. And I think that boils back to what we were talking about earlier. Go make your first sale.
Yes. But then it's the other part too. You know what we need? Here's what we need to work on, bro, is we need to figure out a new language, right? We need a new term. And if someone knows what the term is, please reach out and tell us to go through. Is if you're the one to go through, you're either like these VC backed firms, or it's a lifestyle business. I'm sure you've heard that one to go through, like a lifestyle business to go through. And there's something weird about that phrase, because I think most people, yes, but what do you call everything that's in between? And I see so many companies that are in between, and people are building like amazing things. And what do you call a business that's like a company where they own, I don't know, they own a series of franchises or something? I'm like, hey, everybody who is even the one that's hot today to go through, own like an HVAC business, and you've got 10 different locations and have half the state of Ohio, and you're serving them to go through. Is that a lifestyle business? But you're not VC backable. So what do we do with these? What do we call them, right? Look, this is not just you supporting your family. You are creating seriously large enterprises, but they are not going to IPO and be like a publicly traded company. We need some other names for these things about what people are doing and how they're growing into those, because honestly, you do that kind of amazing thing. You're like, there's always this thing that you do every drive through a community. You look and you're like, I wonder what all these people do. They own businesses like the ones that we're talking about, and they're doing some wild and amazing things. And you have no idea that's what's happening within those office walls. And they're amazingly valuable businesses. And they're what's keeping America going and keeping the world going. So we need a better name for lifestyle business. To me, sounds like somebody who, that like a solopreneur, where it's, look, I'm going to try to keep this as bare bones as possible. And I'm not going to try to grow this out too much more. To me, that's what kind of fits into a lifestyle business. I don't know what we call it when we get beyond that, because there's some pretty wild things that people are doing. So we need a new word. Do you know the word? I don't know.
No, I'm not sure. I'm like familiar with what you're talking about it, because it seems somewhat derogatory
It
to
does.
maybe be
That's what I'm
called
saying.
that. And maybe it's just, I don't know, maybe the semantics of it isn't that important, but there certainly is a distinction there about just because And maybe it's just changing, like, lifestyle business doesn't have to be a bad thing. You can have
Well,
a
yeah.
several $1 million a year lifestyle business where you're just, I don't know, your business is your life and that's okay.
Yeah, so I think we need something that's other than that because I don't want to say that the lifestyle business is hard, but I think just say if you're not one classified, then you must have a lifestyle business to go through and you have different aspirations. I think it's important that we realize that for every type of business out there, there's probably, I guess the way to say this is there's a lot of different types of businesses out there. And knowing that in all cases, there's probably a lot of different types of investors who would be interested in having that as part of their portfolio. And the question is how to bring them together. That's what we're trying to do. I think the more that we have conversations like this and the more groups are out there go through, it's how do we make that connection so that if you need the capital and you have a good business and you are out and you're being successful, I need capital to grow. I'm ready to scale. I'm going to get bigger, that you can find an investor to do that. We hope to be part of the solution at Localvest, but even if not, just like the more we can have these conversations, we need to make that process easier. And I'm looking forward to a lot of other people having ideas to go that and make that process much, much easier and get those businesses going, right? Because we definitely need them.
It's a very powerful mission indeed. Something that I feel equally as passionate about. And I love seeing what you guys are doing and I'm eager to see what the coming years bring. What is it that you think that any veteran could learn only from you, just based on your experience and your time serving veteran business owners?
I think the biggest thing that I would say, let me start with where I admire someone who's raising capital, especially if you're in an earlier stage company, right? You're starting up and you're raising capital and it's not going to be this perpetual thing you do. It is extremely hard to shift between starting a company. Some people are like programming or they're creating new piece of equipment. And then you got to take that hat and then you're trying to sell it. And then you're trying to take that hat off and trying to go and get investor dollars. Getting investment, selling your product and developing your product and fulfilling those orders you have are like, those are completely different things. And it's really hard to be skillful in all of them all at the same time. Most people are not. And you're just trying to get yourself to a spot that wherever you're the weakest, you can hire somebody to go out and do that work and help you grow where you're the weakest. So the biggest thing that I see is it's a hard skill to go out and actually raise capital and to do it if you've never done it before, to go out and do it right. And there's this expectation of you have been living your product for, in many cases, months, if not years, before you actually go out and says, okay, I needed external money to go out and do this. And it's the going out and setting up a structure that will actually work. And it is much more complicated than you think. And there are a lot of people just suck at it. Okay. And I would say the big pitfalls that people do is they'll sell to an investor, right? Getting an investor dollar, they'll use their sales pitch, right? And so they'll go out and try to sell like you were selling to someone who wants to buy your product and you send them an invoice and deal through that way. Investors are thinking about it in a different way. And you have to think what an investor wants to see. And they don't want to see all the character traits of your product. They want to see, how is this a business? What is your marketing structure? How are you going to use the money to grow and to think in those terms? So that's the biggest thing that people can do first. But then that process that very rarely, especially in the market that we've got today, can you just pitch to a group of people and then wait for the phone to ring thinking like that was the best investment pitch because I've been living this. I've devoted my entire life to it, that they're going to immediately just pick up the phone and say, where do I send the check? You're probably going to have to chase them down, right? Have a lot of conversations. You're going to have to convince them that your opportunity is a good one. And they're going to have a lot of due diligence type questions. So I think if you're out there and you're talking like, I think I need to raise capital, I would say that thinking of it from the investor's shoes, what do they need to hear? And try to block out all of the things that you've been doing because you've been living it and know all the ins and outs. Try to frame that in a way that someone who may be skeptical, trying to answer those questions. And then that process in place that goes, how am I going to engage with these people on a regular basis to convince them that it's time to invest? To build on that, one of the best questions that you can ask, right? You have a lot of questions. You're probably going to get a lot of no's. If you go up, you're trying to get someone to invest with you, you're talking about what you're doing, end all the conversations at the end. I'm like, can I include you on my investor updates? And then do it. So all you're asking, and they said, you're like, no, I don't really look invested. I don't know if it's the right thing that I'm interested to go through. I'm like, great. Can I just include you in my investor updates? Get their email. You now have their permission to share your progress and share your investor updates. The best one I see is like every month or maybe every quarter, every month. Just tell them the good, bad, and ugly about what you're doing. It does not have to be elaborate. It can be a few sentences. It can be like a 1-pager update or like a newsletter type thing. Tell them about the wins you've had with customers, the product development you're doing. I've seen people that have not even in revenue and they're just talking about, hey, I learned how to code this, that I've added this feature to go through. I beta tested it with a few people, happen to be my friends to go through, and they give it feedback and here's what we've done. But you never know when that conversation that you have, let's say you do that today, right? You pick up something in the fall of 2023, and then all of a sudden, like middle of 2024, the person comes back and you put an update and goes, oh, I'm ready to invest now. And it'd be some magical thing that you said. You had they won't tell you what it is, but you made the right sale. You grew to a certain size. You released a prototype, and that was enough for them to finally say, okay, now I'm ready to invest. Those are the people that are winning the capital game, is the ones who have that plan. How am I going to have that conversation with somebody over time and not just wait for that phone to ring?
That's so powerful. And I saw something the other day that resonated so clearly with what you're saying. This was written by Moses Kagan, who's a real estate guy. He's on Twitter. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. Not a vet.
I know who you're talking about. Yes.
Okay.
One of my followers.
He is awesome. Posts some really great content, and he's got a soft spot for vets too, which is cool. He put on a vets real estate webinar a month or two ago, which was fantastic. But one of the things and this is from his LinkedIn, which I'm going to abbreviate, but he wrote this post talking about how to raise money for your first real estate deal, and very closely aligns with what you're saying. But the gist of what he said is, make a list of the people that you think might be interested in what you're doing, or maybe even you as an individual. And he emphasizes preferably people with money, because if you're going to ask people for money or like to be a part of what you want, that generally helps. Sit down with them and try to have a conversation about a very real one, about where you are, what you're trying to do, and what your big objectives are. They're probably going to ask you some questions about how you think about certain things and to figure out what you're about, and then take notes and get them on your email list is the big thing. And then he pitches this from a real estate context of, as you're doing deals or like doing the numbers on deals, looking at things every week or every month, send out a thing to your email list and say, oh, I looked at this property and these numbers don't pencil, but walk through your process to your prospective people, because then it shows, hey, this is what I'm about. It shows that you can keep a cadence, that you want to keep them informed, all of those things. And I think that something like this should be applied to people that are looking to raise money too, maybe if not outside of real estate or maybe starting a business, anything like that. Give yourself a chance to show people what you're about. And you got to do the legwork up front though. Go ask them, get their email addresses, and then talk about what you have going on. Be public with it. And I think on a long enough time horizon, you're going to be rewarded for it.
That is exactly true. So Moses is exactly right. And it's amazing to me. I'll go to a lot of different events. I don't get that question a lot. So you will definitely stand out if you, one, do it. And then two, his thing is like to give that follow-up. But he's right. And no matter what kind of business it is, if you give that follow-up to go through, even if your decisions are no, like you said, it's pretty powerful what he talked about in there. If you have evaluated 50 deals and none of them pencil, talk about that process. That's value right there. And you never know, that person may not come in until your fourth deal. And then all of a sudden they're like, I'm ready to come in. And you're like, I thought you were gone. We talked a year and a half ago. I thought you were gone, because it is a long process. But if you're in it for the long haul and you stay consistent what you're doing, or you grow, right? You're growing as it goes along. That's, like I say, you want to get it. Like if you just go out and pitch to some people and wait for the phone, you'll get a very small conversion rate. But if you can get those other ones, you're just going to make your overtime conversion of that list better. So just keep adding people to that list, talk to them, see what they're looking for. And hopefully it lines up with your investment thesis, whatever it is that your company does, and you can bring them in. And then next thing you know, they're investing with you. And once they do the first investment, you never know when they do another one, because if you keep doing that, like, I'm ready to see that again, whether it's a real estate deal, your next company, or whatever it is that you do.
So powerful. Be public, talk about what you have going on. And like you said, on a long enough time horizon, those people are going to come back around. If you've got something interesting going on and you're improving, people dig that kind of stuff.
They do. They definitely do.
Jake, this has been a really fun conversation. I appreciate you joining me. What can myself or anybody listening do to be useful to you?
Well, you can always connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to find it. That's probably where the most active is going. And then also just go to localvest.com. So if you go there, you can sign up. You can sign up as an investor, or if you think you may want to raise capital on the road, but you can go and look, see what it's about. We've got different events. You can always check it out. And then if there's something that you like and have questions, you can reach out to me in all different spots. You can click on the page to do it. But look and see how, if you're an investor, try to expand out the opportunities you have. Or if you're thinking even your early stage, want to raise capital, see how other people are doing it, attend some of the pitches and see how they interact with people and how they present their companies. There's always ways to learn. So that's what I would do, either LinkedIn or Localvest.
I will include those links in the show notes and people
That
can
sounds
check that
good.
out. Jake, I really appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's been fun. Thanks.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. Your listenership helps me better educate people like you and the rest of our nation's military, both past and present, on building a successful life outside of military service. If you're looking for more ways the top vets are leading more effective lifestyles, building businesses, and using the resources designed specifically for you, press here for a selection of some of the best clips. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date, and I will be talking with you soon.